I'm going to start with Jeff Hankinson because he and I have been corresponding about these five-axis, these CNC machines. I think it's going to lead to a bunch of questions in a zone we haven't had before. So Jeff, I'm going to show I put your two short videos together into a 7-minute video. I'm going to show that now. Is that okay with you?
Fine with me.
Okay, you guys are going to have questions, I'm sure, after this, but anyway, we're going to go for it. Share sound, optimize clip, share, play the video. This is a short video showing my latest fifth axis in action, cutting on a curved form. I created this fifth axis to keep the cutter more or less perpendicular to the surface of the work. For a simple round nose cutter like this one, that doesn't matter so much, but for different formed cutters, it could make quite a difference. This simple form was turned on my wood lathe and then digitized and STL file created using Gerbil Group. This was exported to another program called Corn Lathe, which I used to design this simple pattern of sinusoidal curves. Corn Lathe created some G code, which was again processed through a Gerbil Groove, and then I massaged it to add in the B-axis values that I needed to do what you see here. This entire project took about 5 minutes to cut. It's a 1/8 inch ball nose cutter at 30,000 RPM in a small router. As you can see, the cutter tip is maintained more or less perpendicular to the surface of the work. I use a lead screw to move this axis, as it would give more rigidity to the turning forces generated by the router. As you can see, I've got simultaneous movement of the X, Z, A, and B axes. And this was my intention with this project, as opposed to moving one of the rotary axes at a time. Y doesn't come into play, obviously, in this, because I want to maintain the position of the cutter over the center of the work. I hope you enjoyed the video.
So this is regular CNC mode. This is 4th axis mode. And this is lathe mode. And I can put a chuck on here.
Okay, over to you, Jeff. Questions for Jeff?
I'm curious about the motor on your first video. It appeared to be a rotozip tool that you had mounted to your machine. Is that a rotozip?
Yes, sir. That's a rotozip. I actually had the choice of three. I've got a little DeWalt palm router. I've got a little Makita palm router, or that rotozip. I just happened to fit that one because it's got the key sitting in the handle for taking the bits out of the chuck. And when I read they all were 30,000 RPM, I just stuck that one on. It's convenient.
What did you told me something about the fifth axis being attached to the Z axis, and I didn't quite understand. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Well, most of the time, a lot of people will have a CNC machine and they'll have a 4th axis, and you saw that. That's a rotary one that goes around the X. X goes back and forth. And a lot of the stuff that I do, I've done with a 4th axis. And that's fine. And that's pretty straightforward. Although I've added a lot more than some of these expensive programs can do with simple things. My 5th axis goes up and down, as you saw, and that's mounted on a Z. Most of the time you see a 5th axis is attached to the 4th axis, and it's kind of a swing setup, like they call it a trunnion, and it goes back and forth just like it's sitting on a swing seat. And I built one of those, but to code for those is really hard. Whereas the way I did it, mounting it on the Z, it popped into my head one night, and it cost me a couple hours sleep. But it's super easy to code for a simple curve.
So it swings like this as well as going up and down, and it swings in plane with the X axis.
The 5th axis, it rotates around the Y.
Okay.
So it doesn't swing. It goes back and forth like a car window wiper.
Okay. And that's what allows it to follow the curve.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you've got the rotation on the x-axis is rotating the piece, which makes the sine wave or whatever other shape you program in there.
Yep.
So how much of that apparatus did you build, and how much could you buy?
You know, you could adapt. I built everything, but you could adapt that idea to any simple CNC, like a Shakopo or something like that. A lot of people will have a 4th axis. They do cylinders with them, and that's all that they can do. And some years ago, I started corresponding with the author of Gerbil Grew, who is in Germany, actually, somewhere near Cologne. Very nice man. And with his program, I can digitize the outside of one of my shapes. So the shapes that I cut are my turnings. So I'll put them on the 4th axis, and then using a simple Z probe, and no kidding, this Mark II is very simple.
We're not seeing it because of your background. Hold it in front of your
Okay.
face. There you
How
go.
about that?
Yeah, we can see
So
it there.
this cost me probably $1. You can spend hundreds of dollars on these, and then when you crash them, you cry like anything. But this is a bit of wire, a spring from a ballpoint pen, and a little switch. That's it. And it works. And the way those things work is you can just go and sample the points along the curve with that program Gerbil Group, and it'll save it and generate a 3-dimensional, it'll spin it around the axis. So you just get a 3-dimensional file of what you've got. And then I can use that in other programs. So I can export that to expensive ones like carve, which I have. But they can't do a B axis. They sort of do an A axis. They're not made for this. And you can spend an awful lot of money on them and they don't work.
Any more questions for Jeff?
These
Jeff,
are
I got a
really,
que-
these
I have
things really shine when you need 50 pieces that look alike. You know, to do one piece, it's fun to watch, but if you need 50 pieces, all you have to do is remount it and push the button. Fabulous.
Yeah, if you can cut the curve using something like that, but I don't do production stuff. And but I do like having to be able to work on my own pieces. So if it's each of mine are pretty unique. I don't turn them all the same. Then I can individually, and it only takes, to get the readings across the top of a curve only takes like, a minute. Doesn't take long at all once you figure out what's going on.
Jeff, could you just use, without that, what do you call the 4th axis? Could you just cut it and then hollow it out afterwards? You'd have the same effect. Do you get what I'm saying?
You could, but I think a wood lathe is a lot faster. The program author has, wondered why the heck I had a wood lathe in the first place. I could do it all on a CNC. And I said, no, a wood lathe is much, much faster than doing this with a router on a CNC machine. And you don't get the nice finish either. So I'll finish a piece and then I'll put, see, this is done with a simple 4th axis. I don't know if you can see that, but you don't need a 5th for this. But I sampled the curve all along there, and then created a program, and then the A axis, the 4th axis spins this, and you just, at each stage, you cut it. This was with a 1/4-inch ball nose by the looks of it. And that's a nice little form. Pretty easy to do fluting. Took about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes, something like that.
Well, how much programming time is behind that, though? How much software messing around do you have to do?
Not very much anymore. I was doing those. I was hand coding some of that stuff. The very first one I did, I hand coded it, and that took a while. I just had to figure it out for one line and then repeat it every so many degrees.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working with Gerbil Grew's author to get some simple decoration options in his program. This program is free, and it runs on very simple equipment. The control card is cheap. It's an Arduino Mega 2560. It's cheap. It's little. Oops, it's little. I use that to drive external stepper motor drivers with a power supply, and away you go. Like you don't have to spend a fortune on this stuff. Like my
Now,
$1 Z Pro, you know, I'm still using it. I made it years ago. That's the Mark II, and it's still working. When I crash it, I just bend it back.
More questions for Jeff?
yes, when you sample, does the program choose the sampling distance that you go along there, or do you choose that? Do you randomly? It's sort of calculus in a spreadsheet, I guess.
No, the program does it all. Well, you put in the distance you want to sample. So I used to sample the whole thing, and now I just sample the part that I want to decorate. It makes figuring it out simpler later. There on my YouTube site, Embellished Turnings, there's a brief demo of using Gerbil Glue as to get the points on a curve. And there's another demo of applying a regular DXF file to project it on a curve. So it's fun to do this stuff, but say you want to do a lizard or something like that and stick that on the side or something, then this software can do it quite easily. And it's free.
Would you mind putting
It's
in the
not
chat the links that the software link and your own channel stuff in the chat, and then I'll be able to publish the chat after the meeting along with the video.
I will so.
Okay.
Yep.
Also, this is embellishing. You can use the router to make pieces that fit each other, so that I made a puzzle piece for my stool top, and it makes two pieces exactly fit each other. So you can make bowl blanks that are gorgeous, all kinds of them.
Well, you showed us those things a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't quite see your machine. We saw the puzzle pieces, though. You showed us those.
I don't have a machine. I use the makerspace machine.
Okay, that's why we don't see your machine.
No way. I don't have room to get it in my shop.
Anybody else on this, or do we move on? I don't want to use the whole hour for it, but I know that there's intense interest by some in the subject, so I thought we'd have a nice little intro there.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.